dear Mr. Passy, Mr. Buzilov, Your Excellencies, colleagues, would you please allow me first to thank the hosts for this important international forum, for the opportunity offered to present some of the results of a project on which I have been working for several years, but it was finalized due to the support of the Fulbright program, where I had a scholarship between October 2012 and the end of March 2013. The project was addressed to study of various policies and practices in the provision of equal opportunities and the management of diversity in the staff of armed forces. Our work in the Institute in the USA, Defense and Opportunity Management Institute, was an excellent chance for me to make this analysis. The research provided a very good basis for a comparative study of policies among several member states in NATO. Of course, the most in-depth was the one carried in the USA, Canada, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. And I'm very happy that I'm able to say that the product of this project is already in my hands. Clement Ochricky Sofia University has a publishing house, and the whole work has been published by them. So that's as much for promotion's sake. So I would like to place to your attention data which are actual about the representation of service women in the armed forces of the USA, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, and the United Kingdom by categories. And by types of armed forces. It's of extreme importance in my mind not only to take into account the percentage and their ratio, but to see where in the hierarchy are placed women. And of course, what is their presence in the various types of armed forces. On this slide, as I said, is reflecting the situation in the USA by the end of 2012. About 17% in total in the armed forces of the USA, in the Defense Department, are women, 9% are candidate officers, and 14.3 privates or sergeants. Maybe our colleagues from the States had to take stock from us in a report dated 2012, which was presented to the Congress of the United States. It was mentioned that in the armed forces, 99 of positions in active forces are already accessible to women. And this is the highest share of positions in the three types of armed forces open for women. In land forces, the percentage is the lowest, 66, and in the Navy, 88. What is the demographic situation in Canada Armed Forces? On the basis of the analysis of data analyzed, which were presented by my Canadian colleagues, I mean the official papers, this is the data you can see on the screen. In the regular forces, women amount to about 14%, in the reserve they're 16.7%. There is the highest representation, and the total is about 15%. And in the three types of armed forces, which is the next slide, the highest falls to women in land forces, in the air forces, and in the navy is close, and the lowest belongs to the land forces. As you can see here, the analysis of data in the United States, the policies and practices which are being implemented is as well having the gender issue in a wider context, taking into account the whole range of existing differences, cultural, ethnic, people with disabilities. The latest report I got familiar with was presented to the Commission of Military Leadership and Diversity Management. Inclusion was used and diversity as well. These were the two terms utilized. So this was one of the main conclusions I have reached to. I didn't focus only on a specific group of people who for certain reasons are of interest for the time being. What about the situation of armed forces in Great Britain? As a whole, there is a trend after 1990, an increase of the relative share of women in the army, in the Royal Armed Forces. There, it's typical that the percentage is rather high, but it's not yet 100%. I mean, the positions which are accessible to women. The highest is the share in the Air Forces, followed by the Navy, and again the Land Forces keep the lowest place and have the lowest share. On the next slide is the data about the relative share of women in the armed forces in the Netherlands. Again, we see the trend of a growing number of women and an endeavor of a growing share of positions to get accessible to women. Here it's very important to put an emphasis on the fact that there is a political goal set here, and this political goal has been achieved by 2010. 12% ought to be women, but what is much more important, and especially attention is attached to senior officers, not as a whole, but by ranks and by distribution in the army hierarchy. What is the situation in the Belgian army, which is on the next slide? First, women joined the army in 1975, and since then there is a trend of an increase, and the highest of relative share is among the privates, 10.5, 7% among officers, and sergeants 6.7. And last but not least, the German experience is very interesting. You know, there were law courts, and which resulted in a radical change of the policy of the Bundeswehr. After the year 2000, restrictions were lifted, and they were allowed to get to the so-called battle positions, which will result in their career development, which of course is linked to going through battle positions and participation in missions. And again, something which is still missing in this country, a long-term vision and a political goal to reach as much as 15% representation of women in the German army. This is something we do not have. And now the data concerning Bulgaria, I'm very grateful to Neviana, who placed them at my disposal as early as in the preparatory work for the book. You see on the slide the data about the ratio of women being represented in the Bulgarian army. In their totality, in the three types of armed forces and in the common command of armed forces, and as well their allocation by senior and junior officers. Respectively sergeants, privates, and the highest is the representation of in the soldier ranks, as you see in the air forces. As well, and the common command of the forces and the air forces, there is almost an identical ratio, and the representation in land forces follows, while in the Navy they are represented the lowest. According to some data quoted by Minister Angelov, 1.42 belongs to women officers. We still have no woman colonel. Well, there are two colonels, two lady colonels. Oh, thank you, I have not been updated on this topic. But still they are below 1%, so still the representation is not enough. Now I'm going to the conclusions. It continues to be a problem requiring urgent measures and especially long-term policy and a vision for its solution. The representation by structures in women in the army. In general, for the past decades, good practices are prevailing, good practices for the inclusion and integration of women in the army. As we heard, serious advancement was achieved. Bulgaria is among the leading countries in intelligent defense, as perceived by NATO. Of course, I do not want to commit the Ministry of Defense, but I still think that we lack a long-term vision and strategy to provide local equal opportunities for everybody in defense, for their active inclusion in defense, which will motivate much more people, which will make them much more committed, and in this way it will contribute to the improvement of one of the major abilities of the efficiency of the human capital in the army. We should not place the emphasis only on women, of course, but we ought as well to assume a more complex and extensive approach. That was the conclusion reached by some colleagues in the US Army. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready to answer your questions.